I wanted to bring this up here on the Sports Cubicle with the marvelous one, Dan Marver, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, and myself, Mike Mercado. General manager of the Chicago Bears, Ryan Poles, has really been making the rounds when it comes to national media, not so much local media, which is in its own thing a little strange, something that we could kind of break down, whether it comes to sports or politics and all these other different avenues in between, when we don't really hear a lot of local journalists, a lot of local investigators getting some of these scoops, and national pundits do. And for the Bears, it looks like this front office is trying to take that approach of building a national image on top of trying to build trust within the local community. And I can't blame Ryan Post, Kevin Warren, the McCaskies, the entire franchise for doing that, because there has been so much damage done to the brand over the last, 25 years. So I can't blame him for that. But with that being said, they have been doing a lot of the rounds. We have heard a lot from this regime, this general manager, and we heard from him again. And this time it was with Albert Breer on SI.com, the MMQB. You can check out the article. It's an entire conversation about how we got to this point of the Bears getting a first-round pick, the 9th overall pick from Carolina, DJ Moore, a second rounder, a first round next year, just so much in that trade package, and how it got to this point, what offers they got. And I think that's why I want to bring this up. Whether or not this is good or bad, just the cheesemate, if you will, that we're getting from this general manager. And this is something that I thought fascinating, where we see how he evaluated the draft pick to what he thought the value of the pick is going to be from these teams and actual trade assets he was given. So we might go a little bit out of order, but I wanted to bring this to the forefront. What he said about the trading process. And again, this is from Albert Breer. The market early was limited. The Bears talked to the Colts ahead of the trade. Poles and Indy GM Chris Ballard worked together in Kansas City and remained close. But Indianapolis wanted to go through the full process with the quarterbacks and wasn't convinced enough to move. The Raiders came in hot, but Poles and Vegas GM David Ziegler hit some bumps on the package of picks Ziegler would send east. At one point, Poles thought he'd trade down to the second pick with Houston, then down again to the 9th pick with Carolina. The problem was that negotiations with the Texans were dragging. Doubt crept that it would go where Poles wanted it to, and the Panthers were acting with urgency. Well, there were some other opportunities, some hopping around to go from 1 to 2, 2 to 9. That would have been pretty cool, Poles says. The thing was, instead of being greedy and trying to do all kind of fancy things, I felt like when we hit a certain point, I was satisfied. And you can read the entire article over at Albert Breer's MMQB at SI.com. They talk about the road to get there, what it was like after the Texans and Lovie Smith, shout out to Lovie, beat the Colts and were able to secure the number 1 pick for the Chicago Bears. Read the entire article, but it's interesting that a lot of us were all feeling the same way when it came to this pick. We wanted the Bears. If you're a Bears fan, or if you're somebody who covers them, interested in them, whatever your level of fandom is for this team, or how close you are, your relationship with them, you thought that the best course of action was to get out of number 1. You always thought that. It was malpractice if you used that number 1 pick to actually draft a player. Then a lot of us were doing fantasy GM, fantasy football, where, well, you could trade from number 2, from 1 to 2, and then 2 to 4, and then 4 to 7, and then maybe 7 to 9. Like, we were all doing this like it's Madden. It seems like the reality was Ryan Poles was going down that road to begin with, to go down to number 2, talking to Indianapolis, talking to the Raiders, talking to the Panthers. They were turning every single stone to see the best offer they can get, to see what offers they can make with other teams to get these deals done that could put the Bears in a better trajectory than they are, or they were 6 months ago. Now, it's interesting. We're heading into this draft, and this is a conversation that Devin and I have had on this show about what's going to happen with Jalen Carter, because I do believe that either the Seattle Seahawks or the Detroit Lions are going to draft them. And the issue with that becomes, whether it's Hutchinson and Jalen Carter going ahead, against an offensive line that they're still trying to build, and Justin Fields, that seems like a nightmare for years to come. And then if it's in Seattle, no harm, no foul, but you did miss out on a chance on a generational player because you put yourself out of that tier of picks. but you got a number one wide receiver, somebody that's going to help Justin Fields right now with a good contract, a great attitude, all the intangibles, and it's a great age, that building block age. You got Edmonds and you have Edwards, and like they brought in some guys, and we'll see what they do at number 9. So there's so many different avenues that this could have gone for the Bears. Where I find this to be really interesting, comparing the Bears to the Lions, is what happens if and when your trade of a draft pick for future draft picks works out. Because the Lions right now can really do so many different things to help their team win right now and help their future. The same thing with the Chicago Bears. If you're able to hit at number 9, if you know Jalen Carter is going to Detroit and you're going to get one of these two linemen that keep ending up at number 9 in the mock drafts, then you have to make sure you also hit in next year's draft. That is the difference. Those are the moments that create these different teams, all this luck, whether you're the Eagles or you're the Dolphins, you're able to turn these picks into either high draft quality players or superstars already in this league. That's what they need to do. The Lions in this coming up draft can change the fortune of their franchise for the next 10 years. The Bears can be on that same path. If they do right, if the draft falls one way, if they make sure their scouting department is hitting on all these different notes, it becomes really important to see what you're able to do this season, how you're able to see the talent on the field. You're actually able to make some kind of a decision because you've given your quarterback the weapons to highlight how good he really is, a consummate professional at wide receiver, in spite of any quarterback he might have gotten in Carolina, still putting up awesome numbers. You've put it on Justin Fields now to prove it. And it's now up to the front office to prove itself that they can hit on these things. It's one thing to have all the assets in the world. If you do nothing with it, it means nothing. And that's where you see how this could have played out for the Bears. And to see Ryan Poles kind of chesty out there talking, a little bass in his voice. And if that's the case, then it has to work out. It needs to succeed for the Bears. If it doesn't work out for them, the timetable for the next rebuild, depending on how this season goes for Carolina, how it goes for the Bears, how it goes for Justin Fields, sure, you might be able to turn it around soon. But if you're not careful, there's a brand new multi-billion-dollar stadium being built in Arlington Heights, or soon to be built in Arlington Heights, that you're going to try to fill, that you're going to try to have a team in there that gets people excited. You need to hit on these picks. This is the start of it. That team that will win NFC North championships, be in NFC conference championships, maybe be in a Super Bowl, starts now. Starts right now. And seeing how they were looking, going down these roads, trying to assess these trades. We were on the money. We were on the pulse. And Poles pulled the trigger. And now he's got a different challenge, right? He's going to have a lot of great different avenues to pick because this team needs a lot of different talent to find somebody, a need for this team. But now he's playing a different type of chess because there's a team that's drafting ahead of him that plays in the same division, that ended the season hot, that the last game of Aaron Rodgers as the Packers was a loss to them at Lambeau Field. You have to now see what they're doing in Detroit. You got to keep an eye on Minnesota. And then who knows what's up in the air with Green Bay right now. But up in Michigan, in Detroit, Ford Field, there is something brewing up there. And we can say it's going to be the Lions, so they'll line it up. But until that happens, they're in a very dangerous spot for your team right now and your organization's growth. So you're now countering their moves. So does that mean you go offensive line? Does that mean that if Jalen Carter falls to you, you have no choice but to pick him up because you don't want him falling to anybody else in the NFC North, anybody in the NFC, anybody that can stop the development of Justin Fields? This is all about evaluation. This is all about making sure that your foundation is stable in your franchise. So if that's the case, you kind of have to do what Detroit did and hit on a lot of draft picks and then do something that they haven't done with Jared Goff that they might do depending on where they go in this draft. And if you have the quarterback and you're able to hit on these draft picks and you have these contracts and this cap space in this cap room and you're able to do this, and when we all know it's just fake money in the NFL, you're able to control that. You put yourself in a good position. And just all going full circle, in my opinion, the idea of hearing so much from Ryan Poles. Will this come back and bite him in the rear end? Or will it just kind of be the new wave of, hey, they're flaunting it because they got it? I don't know. But more importantly, I want to know your thoughts. What did you think about Ryan Poles talking about all the trades that were on the table? Some of the hesitations from some of these other teams, putting the onus on them, putting the pressure on those GMs saying, hey, fan bases, your team didn't want to make a move. I was ready to go. A really interesting ploy indeed. But we want to know your thoughts about this entire situation heading into the NFL draft with our Chicago Bears. We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. For the marvelous one, Dan Marver, for Devin Tingle, for Paul Chivari, I'm Mike Mercado.